welcome to Things Are Getting Strange, an X-Files Rewatch podcast. I'm Nick.
And I'm Kim.
And despite excitement of UFO Senate hearings, I don't think there's much happening in that area this week.
What a shame.
I know, right? How about Farfest?
It's still occurring in September in the Mall of America. No, there hasn't been much more gossip about Farfest. We still don't know who these two extra guests could potentially be. I did buy myself a t-shirt on their website when I got paid, though, so at least I've done my bit, even though I can't attend.
A shame. Maybe for the 60th anniversary, 50th anniversary? Oh my god, that's terrifying.
I know, right? It's the problem with being all the way over here in the UK.
Also old.
And old.
And old.
So old.
I suppose then we should move along to episodes for this week.
Yeah.
So first up we have Pusher. Directed by Rob Bowman, written by Vince Gilligan, and first broadcast on the 23rd of Feb 1996. Guest stars. Robert Wiseman plays Robert Patrick Modell, also known as Pusher. He was in Watchmen.
Who was in Watchmen?
Nixon.
Ah, right. Yeah, I can kind of see it.
Just could not bring that one up. He will have reprised the role of Pusher in a later episode of The X-Files called Kitsungari. He'll also show up in Millennium.
Okay.
Okay, so also elsewhere, and I feel a bit sorry for this guy because he hasn't got the greatest credit on here, but Roger Cross plays SWAT team member, which is the guy I think who talks to Mulder and Scully.
Mm.
Done loads of things, but we previously saw him in Fresh Bones. But he's also been in Free Willy 3, Final Destination 2, Chronicles of Riddick, Justice League Dark, where he plays Jon Stewart. He's been in Millennium, he's been in Star Trek Enterprise, he's been in Orphan Black, he's been in Dirk Gently's Detective Agency, the American version,
yeah.
Fallout New Vegas, Saints Row the Third, and in Bioshock Infinite.
Oh, cool.
There's also Steve Backick, who played Agent Collins, who we previously saw in Soft Light and we'll see again in Fallout et Deux, much later on. He's also been in Millennium. And the weirdest guest star, which you've noted, and in conjunction with the Foo Fighter reference from last week, is Dave Grohl, of all people.
He only has a really brief cameo, though.
He does. And Amanda Youngblood is with him.
Oh, really?
Amanda Youngblood. But you can never not think of Linkara when they say that, or, I've forgotten his name.
He's Rob Liefeld.
Rob Liefeld, that's the guy. So, Pusher. Robert Patrick Modell walks to the supermarket buying a large supply of energy drinks. When he goes to queue, he pulls the windbreaker of the man in front of him to reveal he is an FBI agent. This causes a raid to begin, and he is arrested. While being escorted away in a police car, he repeatedly talks about the colour cerulean blue, and says that cerulean blue is a gentle breeze. Modell's words seem to cause the driver to not see the approaching truck, and causes a collision with the police car. Frank Burst is the only survivor of the crash, and discusses the case with Fox Mulder and Dana Scully. He refers to Modell as Pusher, who has committed a series of contract killings over the past 2 years, but all the cases seem to imply they were caused by suicide. Mulder spots the word Ronin written on the crime scene and tracks down Modell's classified advertisement in a mercenary magazine. Mulder very quickly comes to the conclusion that Modell has a psychic ability to push his influence onto other people. Using the phone number in the ad, the agents track down Modell to a golf course in Falls Church, Virginia. Modell causes a SWAT lieutenant to pour gasoline on himself and set himself on fire, and attempts to flee. Mulder, however, finds Modell exhausted in a crashed car nearby. During his arraignment, Modell appears to use his ability to make the judge let him go. Mulder and Scully look into Modell's past and find that he failed to enter the FBI after a psychological examination deemed him to be grossly egocentric and sociopathic. While this is occurring, Modell enters the FBI building using a piece of paper with the word pass written on it in his lapel to bypass security. He's able to locate a computer room and convinces a worker, Holly, into pulling up Mulder's file for him. When Skinner intervenes, Modell convinces Holly that Skinner is a man who mugged her and causes Holly to attack Skinner with mace and beat him. Later, Scully is unable to explain how Modell has his power, but now agrees with Mulder's theory that he can convince people to do whatever he wants. The FBI and the police raid Modell's apartment but find it empty. There are multiple cans of protein drinks in the fridge and medicine for epilepsy in the bathroom. Mulder suspects that a brain tumor has given Modell the psychokinetic ability he is exhibiting, but the power is physically exhausting him, forcing him to consume the energy drinks. Modell makes a phone call to Agent Burst and causes him to have a fatal heart attack while they trace the phone call. The agents track Modell down to a hospital nearby, where he has compelled a guard to shoot an MRI technician and kill himself. Mulder enters the hospital alone and is swiftly captured by Mydell. Scully enters shortly afterwards and finds Mydell and Mulder sitting on either side of a table with the dead guard's revolver. Mydell forces Mulder to play Russian roulette. Despite Scully's pleading, Mulder pulls the trigger at Mydell and then himself. Mulder then makes him aim the gun at Scully, and at the last instant, Scully pulls a fire alarm and breaks Mydell's concentration. Mulder instantly shoots Mydell and he is severely wounded. Later, Mulder and Scully visit Mydell in the hospital, where he's lying in a coma, which Scully predicts he will not awaken from before this brain tumour kills him. Mulder surprises her by revealing that Mydell's brain tumour was operable at all times, but he refused to have it removed even as his health deteriorated. Mulder conjectures this is because he wanted to feel big. So, this is an episode, I said to you afterwards, because I have extremely few complaints about this. There's not a lot wrong with it, I feel.
That's rare. You like to complain about things.
Yeah, I know, I've got a reputation, but there's not much that doesn't work. I mean, there's a few fiddly bits and pieces, like you noted the improbability of having the Japanese-English dictionary on the shelf, and Mulder seeing a random advert for Osu and saying, I've seen this in loads of magazines, I'm going to look up what this word means. Oh, it means to push. That must be our guy.
I think that's just a bit of a stretch because we're not indicated that Mulder can speak Japanese in any way, because he even says he only knows the word Ronin because of Yojimbo. So seeing Osu as a word, or Oshu as Mulder says it, is Osu doesn't really look like a Japanese word unless you're familiar with Japanese. It's not like, having a longer word or a recognisable Japanese word in there. So that's the only, my small gripe is it felt like a stretch that Mulder would instantly jump on it being Japanese and not an acronym or something.
Yeah. But for all Mulder's ability to work out what Pusher is doing very early on, there's a lot of actual boring detective work they have to do. They've got stacks of these mercenary magazines they're just going through looking for, they don't know what, they're just looking for something. And then they spend hours taking out a payphone that fails to ring and Scully dozes off.
It made me think more of DPO again. It's another one of our more procedural stories where you actually see them following kind of due course. You even get the arraignment in the middle of it.
Yeah, and this thing's like, the last number dialed from this phone booth then sends them to the golf course. And it's good. It's really good. There's like a chain of events that we can follow, even though Mulder manages to come up with what's happening without any kind of hints, really.
It's nice following on from last week when we criticised Piper Maru for Scully having that bizarre bit where she went to speak to an old family friend who turned out to be integral to the plot.
Yeah, this is much better to have it this way. And it can't be overstated that Patrick Mydell, or Pusher, is kind of amazing kind of villain. A very charismatic, very compelling villain.
Likeable as well.
Likeable, yeah. You kind of want him to succeed because even though he's a sociopath, I mean, it's kind of, you forget that the egocentric and the sociopathic thing when he's talking to Holly, because it feels like he's being really nice to her, even though he's ultimately just using her for his own ends, and then sets her on Skinner.
It's the Hannibal Lecter effect, though.
It is. But he's very good at it. It's a good casting choice there.
Yeah, he is excellent. Like I said, it's odd to call him likeable, given that he doesn't do anything in the episode to make him actually likeable. It's just pure charisma.
Yeah. Well, this is one of Vince Gilligan's tricks, because this is how Walter White works in Breaking Bad, obviously.
I think Walter White's kind of interesting because Robert Mydell is kind of proto-Walter White, because you even have the fact that he's got terminal cancer.
Yes. Although Walter White with psychic abilities, now there's bizarre other version of Breaking Bad.
But you still have the idea of Walter White's very good with his words and very good at convincing people, even though he doesn't have Pusher's psychic powers.
And I suppose also sort of the willing to sort of not take the easy way out when it's offered to him, as I'm like living.
I thought that's kind of an element of realism to Pusher's character, is you've got the idea of evil being something small and human in this episode, in that Pusher has brain tumour, but it's always operable. He could have been healed at any time, but he, as a man who's been small and been weak and hasn't amounted to much in life, and he's suddenly got this godly power. And so he's basically chosen to cut his life short just so he can feel strong.
Yeah.
It's a very human motivation.
Absolutely. And he also conforms to one of those serial killer things of they're unable to not boast. So he's rung up drunkenly and boasted about killing these 14 people who no one had any idea were murders.
It's in part leading up to his big finale, though, is that I think Pusher always knew that he wasn't going to get out of that hospital alive at the end. So, it was the going out with the blaze of glory and making a name for himself.
He could have taken Mulder out, though, and Scully.
But he was never going to get past the entire SWAT team, was he?
No, I mean, he does, as much as his ability is kind of terrifyingly potent, it seems to be, it's either single target, because that could explain why he can only influence Holly, can't take out Skinner at the same time. Because I don't think you ever see him use it on two people.
It's even in the car with Cerulean as a gentle breeze. He doesn't use it on burst, he uses it on the driver.
Yeah, so it's possible he can only influence one person at a time.
Mm.
Like when he gets out of his arraignment and just influences the judge very blatantly.
And only Mulder during the Russian roulette scene.
Exactly. So it's a neat ability, but it has limitations. So yeah, he wouldn't be able to get past an entire SWAT team.
It's inferred it takes a lot of strength, but a lot of personal strength and a lot of focus as well, in the fact that it breaks the second the fire alarm goes off. And in the bit at the driving course, he basically can't move afterwards because he's so sick.
Yeah, I do kind of like when they actually catch him, though, just because clearly he was trying to do a getaway and he's just crashed, and it's sort of like just groggily looking at Mulder like, I better get off. And he does.
The bet with Mulder as well, the whole, I'll bet you a $5 I can get off, and Mulder pays off.
It's a nice little comic incidents like that.
It does have some little comic moments. There's just some little bits of wit in there, like Scully's comment about, a killer who's also a golfer, how unusual, being the really, really obvious jab at O.J. Simpson.
Yeah, and I like just how he's very much a weeaboo kind of character. Like he's fascinated with Japanese culture. I don't think he actually understands it very well, because like when he's golfing with the Japanese businessman, there's not a real sense that they actually want much to do with him.
That's kind of nice in the book, actually. This is another one with a novel tie-in. The young adult novel's called Control for this one. But the scene at the driving range, and actually in a lot of the instances where Pusher uses power on someone, you're in the head of the other person. Okay. So it's these Japanese businessmen who, this brash Americans come up, who's being really loud and disrespectful, yet they just find that they can't tell him to go away. And at the end, when he says, I was never here, they suddenly forget he's there, and they're just left confused, and I think they just question, like, whose turn is it next? So
what did he say, Konnichiwa, as a goodbye?
As he leaves, in a very Del Boy Trotter sort of way.
Like, no, that's not how that works.
It's the end as well, where he claims that he's a student of Budo and stuff like that, despite the fact he's never left the country.
Yes. Yeah, never been out of the States, never travelled, applied to the FBI.
It's much like Mulder, his knowledge of samurai seems to come from Akira Kurosawa.
He's got himself Ronin and Ronin, sorry, yeah. And the other comic moment, obviously, is just walking into the FBI with "pass" written in your label in big letters. And the fact this works for him.
It's really cute.
And that's where you can see Dave Grohl, I think.
Yeah, it's that scene. I must admit, I didn't spot him in the episode, but he is somewhere there.
Poor Holly, though, who we kind of like to hope wouldn't be fired, but there's not a good defense for what she does to Skinner.
I can't see a world where she wouldn't be fired without Skinner outright coming and saying, no, it's okay, psychic powers, this happens.
Though it's interesting that Scully actually comes down on Mulder's side on that. It's like, no, I can't explain what's happening either, but yeah.
The facts are these.
Another good comic moment then is, not only does he see the Fluke Man on the cover of one of the tabloids.
Right at the very start of the episode.
Yeah, but also the fact he just deliberately ruins the FBI sting or just triggers it early. Just by pulling this guy's windbreaker.
Yeah, it's oddly light-hearted for a straight Monster of the Week episode, this one, because it's not actually one of the comedy ones again.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the question would be, how on earth did he know the guy in front of him was an FBI agent, unless he sort of noticed there was this thing he could, the bit of fabric which reveals they are FBI.
The thing that seemed to trigger it is he saw the car with the blue and reds pull into the parking lot. But again, why you'd know there was an FBI person in a really weird disguised FBI flak jacket there.
I think it is actually a thing they do for some reason.
It's strange because the flap on the back's so visible, you think it'd still be a giveaway.
I'm guessing it's the whole at a quick glance, you're not going to notice it. It's just so they can reveal themselves to be FBI agents. I don't know quite how this works, but I've seen it in other things.
You also, in that opening, get introduced to Frank Burst and his great name, who I think he's quite strong for a secondary character in one of these episodes as well.
Yeah, shame he has not been anything of real note for us.
Yeah, but within the episode, he immediately is more accepting than most of the cops we've seen so far, because he's the one who cottons on to the fact that the cerulean is a gentle breeze and the blue truck that says cerulean on the side of it are connected in some way. And when he presents it to Mulder, it's like, I can't explain it, but again, the facts are these, something weird has happened here.
Yeah. I suppose that's the weird thing about it is Push's ability does kind of shift depending where you are in the episode. Because at the start, it's very much cerulean blue, like a gentle breeze, is how he's influencing the guy. But there's nothing like that when he does it to the judge. He's not got a repetitive phrase or anything he's using.
There is when the young man immolates himself, though, because
Yeah.
Push is repeating light up, which is the same thing the guy's saying as he pours gasoline over himself.
Yeah. But it's not consistent across the thing, so we don't see what he says to Mulder either.
No. But mind you, Mulder's already under his thrall by the time Scully arrives as well.
Yeah.
That scene, apparently, they thought was going to get banned as well for the Russian roulette. It was something to the effect of, it's been the first time it had been shown on network television since an airing of Deer Hunter, and that airing of Deer Hunter had led to some kids replicating this and, of course, killing themselves. So that's why they weren't sure they'd be allowed to actually show Russian roulette on screen. It is an intense sequence, though.
Oh, yeah.
Possibly one of the most intense sequences we've seen in the X-Files so far, because you're really not sure where that scene's going to go.
No, or how they're going to get out of it, given that nothing that Scully's saying seems to be stopping Mulder doing what he's doing.
And you have that abject horror of the fact that Mulder cannot stop himself, and you see Scully tearfully begging for her life, and he's just out of control, can't stop.
To go back to Frank Burst, though, he's a great character, but it's interesting how dedicated he is, even when Pusher is basically causing a heart attack while he's on the phone. He absolutely refuses to stop listening to him so they can get the tracer completed.
I want to question first aid training once again within the police force's time. It's the fact that he is obviously going down for quite some time while he's on the phone, and Pusher's causing him to have this heart attack over the phone. But all the other cops stop Scully from administering first aid. I mean, you've just got to assume that they've heard of her reputation for just doing this so badly that she kills off characters. But to be fair, Scully does do all the first aid correctly when they actually let her at Frank Burst, which is by far too late.
Oh, wow.
But you see the Frank Burst, he's sweating, he's breathing hard, he's very clearly going down, and no one steps in to help him. They indeed just prevent Scully from doing so.
A guessing chain of command or something. I do like also, though, that Push's kind of horrible twist on the end of it is just giving them the phone number. After they agonisingly traced it, he just gives it over.
As fun as Pusher is, that's probably the nastiest sequence in the entire thing. The fact that Burst's death is entirely pointless.
Yeah. Actually, leading on from the phone call, there is one of the other, probably least graceful bits of the narrative, is they trace the phone number to a payphone, and he says, "Oh, it doesn't matter, I'll be gone by the time you get here." And then they just look, oh, there's a hospital down the street, which is the one that Pusher's been using. He must be in the hospital. That's not that graceful, because he could totally just not go into the hospital and you'd be sunk.
At the same time, though, Pusher is, from the start, he says he's leaving a trail of breadcrumbs, and Pusher wants to go out in a blaze of glory, so it could be entirely intentional.
It could.
That's where he's decided he's going to have his last stand.
Although he could just make the call from inside the hospital if he wanted to do that.
Questionable.
I suppose if you want to do the battle of wits, for them to conjecture, make their last logical leap, okay, I can see that logic.
It is a battle of wits. You're going on the basis of, to a very westernized standard, Pusher thinks he's a samurai, and therefore he believes in honor, and he believes in respecting people who are stronger than him. So that's what he's trying to do, he's trying to find his equal, the entire thing. The entire episode is basically one long duel with Mulder.
Almost by chance, though, because there's no way he would have actually anticipated winding up versus Mulder, which presumably is why he then stole his file.
Well, his first nemesis is Frank Burst, though, who doesn't show to be a worthy adversary. Mulder proves himself to be worthy.
If you feel uncomfortable listening to sort of greasy food, then don't watch that scene.
It's a really good sequence, though.
It is a really good sequence.
In fact, I'm hard-pressed to not. It should be noted for Pusher it is largely considered to be one of the very best X-Files episodes of all time. And I think it's fair, it holds up really well, it's fast-paced, it's exciting, the ending's exceedingly tense, and it's got a good villain.
Yep, and excellent guest casting as well on top of that.
Yeah, I think it's regularly, when you look at listings, it's usually top 10, or if you just count Monster of the Week, it's usually top 3. Pusher will appear.
Wow.
Which is really high praise when you've got a series that's well over 200 episodes.
Yeah. There's not, as I said, there's very, very little I can actually sort of pick out and say, this doesn't work for me or this doesn't make sense. It's extraordinarily well put together.
I think the most bizarre thing is that it has a sequel. It's, as you've mentioned, I think it's season 5 or 6 gives us Katsunagari, which, given that the ending of the episode says Pusher is now in a permanent, irreversible coma and he's just going to die, how we get to this stage is bizarre.
We'll get to Kitsungari when we get to Kitsungari.
But it's less so. Some of the episodes give us an obvious sting, like The Host.
Yeah.
You can see how they can make a sequel from it because the monster survives. Pusher!
I suppose actually think about it, then Clyde Bruckman's one of the few where there's no kind of sting at the end, other than, hey, you might see Strange Yappy again.
Not all of the Monster of the Week episodes leave off with stings.
I mean, Tombs didn't either.
Well, you have the likes of Ice, where essentially the entire site is bulldozed and that's it.
True.
My only real problems with Pusher are just little niggles. It's the whole, when you're going against something who we've established has a power like this, what's the importance in sticking everyone in a flak vest and that sort of thing.
I think presumably it's procedure. But yeah, it does feel a bit weird.
And the fact that in that last sequence, they've got Mulder on a radio and he goes into an MRI room and nobody realised this despite the fact they knew Pusher was in there for an MRI.
Yeah, it's a bit weird.
Because hence the radio static he immediately gets and the difficulty they have following his video feed.
Yeah. I'd say one of the other things is a memory thing is I always remembered Holly being Skinner's actual assistant or secretary. And she's not. She's just this other person who works in the building.
I do have a kind of nice notion of Holly, and it makes it more obvious in the book in a nice character moment, is when Mulder and Scully first meet her towards the start of the episode, she's got the black eye and Scully asks about it. And she explains, how it was a mugging, a result of mugging. And it makes more of it in the book, but it's the fact that Scully immediately does the empathic and just offers her condolences. And Mulder just completely does not read the room, asks her more questions about it, and makes her uncomfortable, so she immediately beats a hasty retreat, which gives you a nice difference between the two of them, once again.
That's Mulder.
Yeah, you see it a little in the episode, but, it's not as obvious without being in Holly's head how uncomfortable it makes her.
Yeah.
When Mulder's, did they catch him? It's like,
No, that's not the important part, Mulder. Come on.
Woman with a black eye, we went through this in Excelsior Day.
Yeah. Yeah, Mulder's not good at this part.
Mm.
For some reason, despite being a psychologist and everything.
I think the other thing that we've only really brushed upon is this is a character episode. It should be noted that Vince Gilligan is considered in the fan base as being the one that leads into Mulder and Scully shipping most in his episodes. And you do kind of see it towards the end one because you've got that intense sequence in which Mulder is trying not to shoot Scully, in which she saves him, where Scully is begging him tearfully and, tears are running down both their faces during the scene because we've got that bond has come to this point where they do genuinely care each other. And it has this nice visual thing just when they go and see Pusher in the hospital at the end, where they very briefly hold hands and Scully pulls away. And in my head, it's kind of reading it as the whole, you've got this close relationship there, but Mulder has just kind of horribly broken Scully's trust as well. He very nearly kills her. And it's just put this level of discomfort within their relationship, which had been growing stronger to this point.
That's very interesting, because there's a little moment earlier than that. When they're on the stakeout. Because when Scully's fallen asleep, Mulder doesn't shake her awake or anything, but he kind of strokes her cheek.
Yeah.
And that's what startles her awake.
So you've gone over the course of the episode from them being quite close to there being this obvious damper.
Yeah, although I will then put to you all your words you said about Apocrypha and how this is a terrible relationship and Scully should run to the hills.
Run to Skinner.
Or Skinner. Well, Skinner's quite tall, he's kind of a hill. Kinda.
I love Skinman. To be fair, for poor old Skinman being beaten up by a little skinny waif-like woman in this episode.
It was very funny, though.
It's ridiculous. Ridiculous scene. And when he's got, like, the high-heeled shoe mark on his cheek later.
Yep. Again, we never see her again, but we hope she did get fired, but how she avoids getting fired is another matter entirely.
It's fun for someone as Skinner who we've seen just bare-knuckle fighting assassins previously in the series.
Yep.
Just to be beaten up by someone like Holly is spectacular.
I mean, that's actually a point. Surely Skinner would actually be in trouble after that, because he was shot last week in the stomach, and she kicked him in the stomach quite a lot.
You don't know how much time's passed between
We don't.
episodes.
In broadcast terms, it was a week. So, yeah, Skinner's fully recovered in this episode, it must be said.
Maybe that's your reasoning for why Skinner couldn't overpower her.
Other
than the fact, I guess, he's entirely taken by surprise and knocked off his feet by her first attack.
Yeah, which is the main reason.
I guess you wouldn't expect kind of a secretary to suddenly turn on you.
Nah. Anything else?
No, I think we got everything.
It's the problem with good episodes. It's
we can
quick.
Wax on for ages when we've got something bad to say, but top tier, would wholeheartedly recommend watching this one.
Now, saying that, we have an interesting situation here then, given, we struggle to talk about Pusher because it's really good. I'm going to go on a limb here and say we're going to struggle about this one for the opposite reason.
I don't know, this one's got some level of notoriety about it.
It is, but I will also... we'll get to it in a second. So, second episode we watched, and I'm going to try and remember this again, because it's Teso Dos Bichos.
Teso Dos Bichos.
Teso Dos Bichos. Directed by Kim Manners, written by John Shaban, and broadcast on the 8th of March 1996. Guest stars include Tom McBeath as Dr. Luton, who's been previously in Watchmen.
Again?
Yep, bizarrely. Alien vs. Predator Requiem, that film that shouldn't exist.
I prefer to think it doesn't exist.
Yep. But he's also been in The X-Files twice. He was in Space, and he was in 3.
Okay.
Ron Suave played Tim Decker, who we noted before was previously Ray in The Host.
Yes, that's right.
And Alan Robertson played Carl Roosevelt, who was previously Charles in Fire.
Okay, yeah.
So would you like to give us a synopsis of Teso Dos Bichos?
Certainly. An anthropologist named John Whitney is studying a tribe in South America, and he drinks a soup made for him by the tribesmen. Shortly after, we see him talking with the captain of a merchant ship. He asks them to remove the cargo he had intended to send to the Chicago Museum.
Wait.
What?
That's the Relic, or Relic.
Can we talk about the Relic instead?
No, we can't. We're talking about Teso Dos Bichos.
But I like the Relic.
I know, but come on.
Okay. We open at an archaeological dig in the Ecuadorian highlands. There are actually 2 archaeologists involved. There's Dr. Belak and Dr. Roosevelt. They get into an argument over the removal of a burial urn they found, which is called an amaru. It's the resting place of a female shaman. Roosevelt believes that the urn belongs in a museum. It needs to be taken away from the site and preserved. This goes against Belak and the belief of the local tribespeople. Later, a native shaman distributes a bowl of a stew made from yaoi to the local villagers, and Belak also partakes in this. During this ritual, a jaguar, or at least a jaguar-shaped spirit, appears in Roosevelt's tent and drags him off. We cut to Boston, where Mulder and Scully are investigating the disappearance of a Dr. Greg Horning, who's an archaeologist from a local history museum. Although Horning's body has not been found, a security guard has discovered a large amount of blood within his lab. They interview both the curator, a Dr. Luton, and a graduate student working there called Mona Worsner. They also visit Belak at his home, who has now become a slightly creepy recluse. All of these people reiterate a lot of what we saw in the opening sequence, that the Amaru urn was brought back to the museum. However, people vary in their beliefs about what should happen to it. Dr. Luton being on the side of it belonging there, Belak and Mona, of course, believing that it should be returned to the native peoples. After closing up the museum that night, Luton is killed by the jaguar spirit after his car does not start. Mulder and Scully investigate the crime scene. Scully finds some rat corpses in the engine compartment of his vehicle, and they, later while searching for his remains, see blood dripping down from the trees and discover a portion of Luton's intestine wrapped around a high-up branch. Mona, when questioned, continues to deny that anything unusual has happened in the museum. Later that night, Scully is beginning to autopsy the intestine, but she is interrupted when Mulder suddenly receives a phone call from Mona. She reports that she has visited Belak at his home and discovered that he's under the influence of yaoi. While at the museum, she has started to hear strange noises and believes that there is someone there with her. Mulder and Scully tell her to remain where she is, and Mulder goes rushing to see if he can help her. Following the noises she hears, Mona makes her way to the bathroom, where she opens a toilet lid to see rats forcing their way out of the sewers. By the time the two agents arrive, Mona is nowhere to be found. They instead discover Bilak crying inside the toilets, saying that Mona is already dead. Bilak is held within a secure room within the museum, but manages to escape without exiting through the door. Mulder notices a large drag mark in the dust through the floor and discovers a hatch leading to the museum's old steam tunnels, and assumes that Bilak has been dragged down there. While exploring the tunnels, the agents find remains of the victims and soon discover that there is a large creature stalking beneath the museum, an ungodly mix of giant reptile, insect and human that is hunting down the patrons by night.
Oh, no, you don't.
What?
It's a bunch of cats. You know it's a bunch of cats. It's not the Cathoga.
Can it be the Cathoga?
No, it cannot be the Cathoga.
You're absolutely sure you don't just want to talk about the Relic?
It's a tough call, but this is a big podcast, not 90s action horror films.
Okay, there is no impressive puppeteered giant reptile in the sewers. They find cats. As the two agents try desperately to escape while, let us say that again, are pursued by ordinary house cats, they come across Bilak's mutilated body. The two agents manage to escape and close the hatch on the cats that are still bizarrely chasing them. The episode closes with Mulder suspecting that all of the animal attacks were associated with the burial urn, due to the fact it had been removed against the wishes of the Ecuadorian tribespeople, thus triggering this ancient curse of the female shaman, or an Amaru, a spirit that's a combination between human, jaguar and scorpion. It's noted at the end of the episode that the urn was shortly returned to the burial grounds, where a local shaman watches as it is reburied. We see that this shaman has slitted jaguar-like eyes.
That means absolutely nothing.
I know, right?
So the Relic.
Yes.
I mean, it's difficult not to bring Relic into this, even though if John Shaban was influenced by anything, he was influenced by the book, not the film, since they were basically in production simultaneously.
Yeah, I do call sus on the fact that he's not read Relic. I have read Relic. For those of you who don't know, because it's not actually terribly well known, The Relic was an American monster horror film that was made in 1997 in the wake of Jurassic Park, so naturally basically involves a dinosaur loose in a museum.
And Stan Winston made the monster, so it looked really cool.
Yeah, Relic is actually worth a look. It's a bit of an unsung classic. It's a very slow-burning monster movie. You see very little of the creature, although it's an incredibly impressive puppet. The Hathoga, the monster, is called, because it's largely always in shadow, and they're very sparing with CGI in the film. It's very tense, it's very gritty, there's a lot of detective stuff before you get to the giant reptilian insect monster part. And it's based on a book. So Relic the movie was in 1997, so was actually after Teso Dos Bichos by a year or so. The book was published a year or so before Teso Dos Bichos, which is why... And the book is actually very close to the film. The ending's quite different. But for the more noticeable things of the start of the film, or the start of Relic almost exactly mirrors the start of Teso Dos Bichos. It's just a bit too similar.
Yeah, it's very suspicious. It's hard to know where you even start with this episode, because in memory, I do remember that I can never remember what happened in this episode. I can remember kind of the start and kind of a bit where the cats attacked, and then the rest of the episode was just void. And so watching it again was a case of, this is really quite boring. I don't know, I'm not entertained. I'm just waiting for this episode to end. It's not a good episode.
Teso Dos Bichos has such animosity, and it had animosity from day one, even from the people involved in it, because even the writers and crew did not like Teso Dos Bichos.
No, it's just, how did this get into production? I don't understand how this managed to make it to the screen, basically.
There are a few stories about this one being made, as it has a couple of nicknames, the most crass is Teso Dos Bichos, which is what Kim Manners calls the episode. And indeed, he did up T-shirts for everybody who was involved in it that said Teso Dos Bichos Survivor on them, because he was so down, particularly on the final act of the film. Its other nickname is Second Salmon, because they had a thing with writing the X-Files where rewritten scripts would always be printed on a different colour so you didn't get them mixed up. And Teso Dos Bichos went through so many rewrites that they got round to salmon pink once again.
Which is quite amazing.
But it's also bizarre that it apparently had this many rewrites, and it's still possibly the worst episode we've watched so far.
I think so. I mean, we've made a case for some elements of the conspiracy, and you can make a case for space. Actually, no, it's a tough call between 3 and this one, I think, because they're both really tedious to sit through.
Yeah, it's on the level of, it's not bad like Space or Syzygy.
No, which are entertainingly daft.
Yeah, they're bad episodes, but they're entertaining, and therefore you can get some enjoyment out of watching. This is in that level of 3 where it's actually quite dull, and it feels twice as long as it actually is.
Oh my, yes. And it's also, I think, interesting that it breaks the X-Files structure a little bit for some reason. Because the pre-credits bit, the sting, is the same as normal, but usually you cut to Mulder and Scully being brought into whatever the thing is happening, whereas this starts with the weird murder mystery in the museum and a guy who's killed who I don't think we ever see on screen. Because the body that Mulder and Scully are brought into to see, I don't think we ever see the character.
No, that guy.
Yeah,
because he's different
dead.
to Opening Kill Guy, of course, because Opening Kill Guy's in Ecuador.
Exactly. And it's things like you've got the whole Jaguar shadow at the start, which implies, big cats, which doesn't sound like a great episode of the X-Files anyway, but then that just falls apart. And then you just get, the weirdest bit is the fact they keep turning up so much rat evidence. And it's not rats, but they keep on going to cat, even though it's a case of, we found some half-eaten rats in the engine compartment of this car. So you think it might be rats? No, it's going to be cats. What? Or all these rats are drowned in the toilets because they burst up from the sewers. It's got to be cats in the sewers.
There's one shot in the episode when I think Mulder's returned to the museum where you see a stuffed jaguar. And apparently the jaguar was predominant in the marketing of this episode, so a lot of people went in thinking it was going to be about big cats.
As you would.
And indeed, Kim Manners begged Chris Carter to let him change the ending to include a big cat because he thought, you can make a jaguar scary, you can't make house cats scary.
No.
Which is absolutely right.
Yes, it's an absolutely... Well, I don't know, I wouldn't want to actually call it hysterical because it's funny, but it's also... You're just relieved the episode is nearly over when the cats actually go for them, but there's no threat to it. And Scully might get mauled by a house cat, and her injuries are so slight afterwards, despite the fact she looked like she'd been properly gouged by this cat.
It should be noted that Gillian Anderson is so horribly allergic to cats as well, that you can tell it's fake. The really, really fake cat that smacks her in the face is actually made from rabbit fur.
Oh, okay. And yeah, it's not threatening. And then there's just the inexplicable parts of the episode, like all the point of view shots, which are like in green, which we are meant to assume are Belak in cat form? Maybe question mark? Because how this works is not clear at all.
I don't think, the way I read it, I remembered it be like shapeshifting, but
I don't think
I don't think he does, because the weird substance, again, likening to Relic, in the purpose of Relic is by drinking some concoction that the local tribespeople have made is a person transforms into Kathoga, that is like their guardian spirit.
Yeah.
This big dinosaur-like insectoid thing. In Teso Dos Bichos, they're just drinking Yahweh, and Yahweh is an actual drug, it's an hallucinogen. So it's not the same kind of magic ritual potion in there. And he even says towards the end is, they brought the Amaru's wrath, and he was just trying to appease her. So it feels more like he's praying to the Amaru rather than he's becoming the Amaru.
Yeah, and so then he gets killed, so that sort of throws all that out the window and it's very confused. But it's also weird things like, you get the point of view shot of Mulder and Scully going through the woods when they're looking for the doctor who's gone missing, when they find the intestine in the tree branch. But Mulder looks right up into the point of view shot and apparently sees nothing up there, but there's got to be a cat lurking there. Or a pack of cats?
It's either, admittedly, Bilak is high as a kite through the entire episode, but he infers he's seen the Amaru, so it's either that or it's some spirit watching them from the bushes.
Yeah, and it's just And then the closing sting. The shaman's got jaguar eyes. It's meant to be mysterious. No, what does that mean?
I guess he's another shaman like the Amaruan is, and it describes the shaman's spirit as being a creature with something like the eyes of a scorpion and the claws of a jaguar. So maybe we're getting this idea as there's something supernatural about the shamans of this tribe.
Yeah, but that doesn't help us.
No, not at all. It should be noted as well that Amaru is actually a mythological creature in some South American mythologies, and it's actually a chimera. It's nothing to do with the thing in this episode. It's something that's made from local creatures, so it's largely, jaguar-based chimera.
Yeah, that would make more sense.
Mm.
I think we'd both noted that it was the desperate attempt to make Vancouver look like Ecuador.
We did with some really sketchy camera angles at the start there.
And a lot of snow, which looked really odd. I mean, okay, they're up in the mountains in Ecuador. I'm sure there were mountains in Ecuador.
The cameras and angles in this episode actually were a bit bizarre.
Yeah, there's that one shot of them leaving Bilak's house and it's just on this Dutch angle for ages and you go, what? Why is this here?
I think someone in the cinematography department was trying to be a bit creative.
Kim Manners was desperately trying to say, no, we've got to make this episode interesting somehow.
I think it's much akin to grotesque, is we were trying to make kind of a gritty detective angle for the start, but it works a lot better in grotesque.
Yeah, I'd give grotesque the edge over this one, because this doesn't even have the 7 kind of style levels of dark bleakness and gothicness. You've got a cast of characters who actually feel like you should know who they are. It feels like we're missing an episode or something to introduce the cast.
It's also coming after Pusher, is there's not really any detective work here, is Mulder and Scully are just running from pillar to post because people are telling them to. It's like, there's a disappearance, so they run to the museum, they find a bit of body, so they run to the morgue to autopsy it, they get a phone call, so they run back to the museum.
Yeah.
There's no kind of detective work, and they're not doing anything off their own agency.
No. And other weird things like when they find the drag marks into the steam tunnels, and that's the route they escape through at the end of the episode, but they don't go in through there, which would be much easier than going to the sewer outside and having to negotiate the way into the steam tunnels through the sewer. What?
I think my big problem with that ending is there's no payoff either.
No.
Is we know we're nearing the end of the episode, we're expecting our big climax and our big monster showdown, turning on the escalator to crush tombs, other set pieces we've had in episodes. And they basically go down to the sewers, they find a lot of admittedly horribly mangled, eye-missing-y corpses, see some cats, run back out, and the episode ends.
Yeah. And be like he's just dead, and it's like, wasn't he your prime suspect? And then it kind of feels like, again, the focus is wrong, given that the ultimate conclusion is, hey, the Ecuadorian government has intervened and asked for their relic back, so we're shipping it back there so it can be buried and the curse is over. And you kind of want to say, surely the political machinations where this is happening should have been what the episode was about, given that you failed to make the monster movie in the
It's an interesting modern idea as well, is the fact that back in the 90s we didn't really talk about antiquities that much. Is that it's a hot topic now, particularly in England, because it's like 99% of the contents of the British Museum really shouldn't be in England.
Oh yeah, like the Parthenon, which there's no excuse for why it's there at all.
The Rosetta Stone.
The Rosetta Stone.
Is the England, America to a lesser degree, but definitely England, is we are guilty of taking so many antiquities from countries that we really should return to them.
Yep.
And that's the entire point of this episode, is that we have decided as white Americans that we are going to take this Ecuadorian antiquity because we know better than the local people. Bad stuff happens, so it's shipped off back to them and bad stuff stops.
Yep. Actually, you can kind of see there the core of what they were actually trying for. But they don't have the budget to do Relic. And then I don't understand where the house cats came from. Because you had if you had a hold of Moggies at the start of the episode, I think the end of the episode wouldn't have worked any better, but would have not felt less jarring, because you definitely had a jaguar shadow at the start.
You even reference, because we've got Dr. Lawton earlier in the episode, that's a reference to, I think, the director of Cat People.
Okay.
Classic old movie.
Yeah.
Is the maybe we were too scared of doing another werewolf episode like Shapes or something like that, because the obvious answer is Bilak's a were-jaguar.
Yeah, but then there was no one else who it could possibly be, and then it turned out he was just getting high? Question mark?
He'd got a taste for yaoi, I think, and continued.
Yeah. And okay. It's just a weird episode, and it basically just falls apart under the slightest scrutiny.
My biggest disappointment is that I realised reading through the notes afterward that he's called Bilak and not Belloc, which is what I've been writing in my notes the entire thing, because I assumed it was an Indiana Jones reference.
Belongs in a museum. No, it doesn't.
So do you.
Well, nothing you want to put Bilak in a museum. He's not that interesting. I would say
You had aspects of this episode that could be interesting. I like the idea of... You criticised our rat motif, but the realisation that we're seeing lots of rats because they're running away from something a lot worse than a rat is something that you could have turned into a lot creepier set piece than it actually was.
Yeah, I think that's my problem with it, is they keep on bringing up rats, and it kind of seems to insinuate that rats are doing things, because like half-eaten rats or something, and just all the rats coming up out of the sewers. And that's all good and creepy, but it doesn't go anywhere or do anything.
I don't like rewriting them, but it's more so I think you could have it if rats were harbingers, if you saw the rats and then realised the rats were kind of running past you and not towards you or something like that, for the just implication that something big is coming around the corner.
You realise, of course, this is what the Silent Hill film did with Bugs and Pyramid Head.
Yes, exactly like that. It's a lot creepier.
It is a lot creepier. Although people then inevitably ask, why Bugs, Pyramid Head? Why are you hanging around with a sea of bugs?
But it adds to some inconsistencies in this episode. There's a bit when they go down to the sewer where Mulder sees a rat and says to follow it. It's like, but you've already established the fact that the rats are moving away from whatever's happening here.
Yes.
So you shouldn't be following the rat. You should be going in the opposite direction to the rat if you want to see what it's running away from.
That would make more sense. They also go down there apparently without weapons and make no attempt to defend themselves. I mean, admittedly, shooting a cat would be traumatic, but they are attacking you, Mulder.
Oh, actually, mentioning the cat's death, sorry guys, I should have probably put this on the start of the episode, but at least we haven't touched on it till now, is if you are sensitive to animals getting hurt, the cats in this episode, absolutely fine, but Mona does have a rather cute pet dog who sadly dies off screen at one point in the episode. You just get a bit of narrative saying they found it dead, autopsied it, and discovered it had eaten a cat, which had eaten a rat, which had consumed rat poison, and that leads us into our whole cat angle.
Well, I mean, that was sort of... It's even less kind of affecting than that sounds, because there's no off-screen death. It's completely outside what is depicted on screen. There's no whimper off-screen or anything. It's just
you see the dog a few times throughout the episode, and then it's mentioned a lot later. Yeah. That dog, it was dead outside. But...
And I keep going back to... There's weird things that feel like... Again, I mean, this could be just the fact that this is, could from the Relic, and he's trying to force Relic into 45 minutes. It doesn't work. But like the Bilak Mona relationship, or whatever they've got going, because it's not clear at all what their relationship is, only there's something there. That feels like it comes out of nowhere around the halfway mark, where she goes to his house. And what was going on with that? And why was Professor Lawton being kind of skeezy, but not, and then he just dies? Why did Professor Lawton die?
Well, Professor Lawton was very pro this Amaru urn should be here and not in Ecuador.
True, but to sell it, you need the argument between Bilak and Lawton. And we don't have that scene.
But at the same time, the Amaru is evidently not controlled because it also attacks both Mona and Belloc, who are both on its side.
Yeah, and I think that's the other problem with it, really, isn't it? Because I think one of the notes I saw said basically that this is barely an X-Files episode because all this stuff happens in the foreground and the plot's happening in the background and no one is attached to it because it's about what happens to this urn. And also the fact the urn arrives, stuff happens, the urn leaves, stuff stops happening, we assume.
It doesn't really focus on Mulder and Scully even much in this episode, and we do have We haven't really had it up till now, but later we do have episodes that kind of follow the villain more than they do Mulder and Scully.
Yeah.
But at this point, it's the whole... We don't get Mulder's crackpot feel explanations. We don't have Scully in character trying to debunk them. Anything like that, because it's not about them.
No, or Mulder does conjecture a crackpot theory, which Scully sort of conjectures. She doesn't actually offer an alternate explanation of anything.
I don't know how you would offer an alternate in this thing, but Scully in particular is massively out of character. It's like, oh yeah, no, Mulder, that can't be it.
Yeah. But, okay, Scully, you're going to have to explain how the intestine got into the tree then. That's kind of important.
In the middle of Boston, so we're not saying this is a bear attack or something like that.
At the same time, we do have to question how a man is killed by even a whole pack of house cats.
Oh no, we own cats.
We do, but it's when he's under the car struggling, that just looks really weird if you then zoom out to imagine there's a whole pack of cats grabbing at him. Because isn't he pulled back out of frame?
Yep, he is.
That's not something that the cats are going to be able to do. They're just going to sort of stand on him and claw him.
These are Amaru cats. They have opposable thumbs and have learned how to fashion lassos.
I suppose so. Eek. Do you have anything else for this joyful episode?
No, I'd rather just forget Tesos Dos Bichos exists. I must admit, it doesn't make me angry like some episodes.
No.
You've got the episodes I really detest, like Eggshells Just Day actually makes me angry thinking about it. And, you have the bad episodes that I love Space. I bring up Space all the time. It's a terrible episode, but it's so entertainingly bad.
Yes. Whereas this is just...
And then we just have this, which is just the absolute pit of boredom.
Yeah. It's not a fun, stupid monster. It's just really... There's no tension to it.
No.
At no point do you feel any threat from anything.
It's the solution of cats did it is ridiculous. But you've really just got to see the episode to see just how not fun that concept is.
Yeah, because saying house cats did it gives you a misleading impression, but had they leaned into that, they possibly could have made something funny.
Your counterpart is something like War of the Cockrophages, is where cockroaches technically didn't do it, but you have this entertaining idea of people being attacked by cockroaches throughout the episode.
Yeah, and it works.
And it's funny, and you wonder if it is the cockroaches for the longest time.
Yeah. And even at the end, there's still an implication that cockroaches might have had something to do with it, or an alien probe disguised as a cockroach might have actually been instrumental in what did happen.
In this, it is cats. Cats apparently empowered by a Ecuadorian curse, the nature of which is never actually extrapolated now I think about it either.
No, we're just meant to take as read, but it shouldn't have disturbed that gravesite. When you were digging for relics, you'd think this would have come up before you started digging up relics. Really? Though the implication, I suppose, is that it's just this one in particular, but still.
I think the idea is the fact that this is a rare find and it's remarkably intact.
Yeah.
Because they only really break the edge off of it and then realise what it is and stop.
Yeah. Oh well, let's just leave it alone and not talk about it anymore.
Yeah, I get the impression that unless there's some really bad episodes to come, I think we know what we're going to be talking about when we vote for the worst episode at the end of the season.
This season. There was a contender overall, which we need to get to in season 7.
Ah, yes, I know the one you mean.
That one.
However, we vote by the season in this household.
Well, no, we'll have to do a overall thing at the end. When we get into season 11, we'll have to have which is the best and worst episodes of the X-Files, full stop.
So yeah, guys, I'm sorry this has been a weird episode, but we brought you to the highs and lows of the X-Files this week, apparently.
Somehow. Next week is uneven, but not as bad as this, because we get Hell Money, featuring Lucy Liu before she became famous.
And James Hong.
Seen most recently, I think, in Everything Everywhere All at Once. And the other episode is about some author writing a book, Jose Chung or something. From outer
People
space.
mention it every now and then.
Yeah, comes up a few times. It's a whole thing.
That's not how I remember it.
You've been waiting for that one.
Oh, so long.
I'm sure this will all make sense next week. However, in the meantime, if you'd like to get hold of us, our email address is thingsaretgettingstrange42@gmail.com.
Alternatively, you can find us on social media. We're on Twitter and Tumblr at GetStrange42. We're on Mastodon at getstrange42 at universedon.com. And on Facebook, you can find us by searching for Things Are Getting Strange, an X-Files Rewatch podcast.
We have a Patreon, patreon.com/thingsargettingstrange, where you can see our Let's Play of the X-Files game as we slowly progress through it.
We have 3 tiers that you can fund us at. If you fund us at any level, you will have access to the Let's Play and any future special things that we do.
Our theme music is Envision by Kevin MacLeod. You can find that on incompetech.com, licensed under the Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0. Thank you all for listening, and remember, until next week,
Cerulean is a gentle breeze.